Begin the current Daf Mesech Kesuvos Daf Kuf Beis. Begin on the bottom of Kuf Alvin Beis, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Yemen. When the Gemara continues, we really introduce the halacha that unrelated to our parak. We only brought it in because the Gemara is going to relate right now and ask the question on Rish Lakish from the halacha of our Mishnah. Shir corresponds because of Cheskel to any time Daf Chaim Shem joining today's Daf. Some of the things discussed in today's Daf are halacha of Gilul Marab that says when they're making the tnoyim, it says how much are you going to give to your son? I'm going to give this much. How much are you going to give to your daughter? I'm going to give this much. And if they just go ahead and made the kedushin, there's going to kinyan, and that's what's called hinan from a nikma mira. The kinyan happens just with words, even if there's no actual kinyan. The question of whether an agreement that falls into the category of hinan from a nikma mira, like that type of shtor psikta, is that allowed to be written in a shtar and signed by Eden? Because when you do it, then it can be collected from the chasam shabbat. The question is, are those things that could be collected from the chasam shabbat? This case that we're discussing with the previous stuff, there were no Eden in the shtar, but he gave him the shtar in front of Eden. What's the halacha regarding ayuchayiv or pater? The Gemara introduced a case of Arav Hayitza Achachis Shtaris. If let's say a guarantor which guarantees the loan, he only signed after the document was already signed by the witnesses, so there's really no Eden to the Chiv of the Arav. Question is regarding his obligations. Some important terms of constants in today's stuff are Basla, Eitzel, Ima, which we allow the daughter to go near her mother regarding being fed from the chasam of the Yisayim. She doesn't have to be with them. The halacha that when the zen end of a chaser, we force a person not to be like the people of Sidon. So we begin the 12th parak on Isis Isha in the previous daf. We said if someone gets married to a woman, makes up with her to feed the daughter 5 years, so you have to feed her 5 years, even though there's only a verbal agreement without Akinyas, we'll see in the Gemara, which that's based on a teaching of Gidla Marad. So if she gets married to someone else and made up, we said that there's going to be an obligation for 5 years. You can't say, I'm going to feed. Rather, you have to go ahead and continue going ahead and feeding even more. So let's begin on the bottom of Kuf Aleph from base. So we're in the middle of a discussion over here regarding the teaching of this machlekes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. So there were no Eden in the shtar, but he gave him the shtar in front of Eden. Yochanan says, it's like as if you're telling the witnesses or the people around them, you're my witnesses. Shlach says you're going to be pater. It's not significant. You didn't say Atam Eidim. So on that the Gemara asks, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Shaman gets married to a woman, and he makes up to feed her for 5 years. He says the Gemara assumes my love isn't it talking about Kihai Gavna, meaning what type of witnesses will this girl have subsequent regarding this makeup that her stepfather had with her mother? Isn't it like we're describing, where he gave her a document to the mother in front of witnesses, and it said, this person accepted upon himself to feed this daughter for 5 years. So there's no kinyan, there's no signing, and even so, you see you can be chayiv, not like Rish Lakish, because like Rashi says, if the document was signed, so what would the Mishnah be saying? Of course, there wouldn't be any chiddush. Must be the chiddush is that even though it's not signed, that seems like Rabbi Yochanan says you can be chayiv, and now Rish Lakish says you can be pater. That's the Gemara, as we continue to come based on no, we're talking about b'shtari psikta. We're talking about something very different. We're talking about where the chasnei kala make the tnoyim between themselves in front of witnesses, and the witnesses are bona fide witnesses. So of course there's going to be a chiyuv. So if you get so what's the chiddush of saying this halacha that he made up in the tnoyim to feed the daughter for 5 years? What's the chiddush? No, you needed. We're talking about where there was no actual kinyan. There's no chalipin. There was no actual acquisition. It was just words, and that's what we're telling you because you have gidl that you don't need to have a kinyan when it comes to the tnoyim. It says, when you have a situation of kamat and bincha, how much are you going to give to your son? And he says, I'm going to give this much. And how much are you going to give for your daughter? I'm going to give this and this much. The kids, they get up and they make it the kedushin. There's a kinyan. This is what's called things that are acquired with just words. And that's the chiddush in the halacha of our Mishnah. Not the fact that there was no chasima. Maybe there was a chasima. Because maybe like Rish Lakish, if there was no signing, he just wrote, you would not be able to mechayiv yourself. The chiddush is in the halacha of Gidul Marab that you don't need to make an actual kinyan. The Gemara says Tashmat's being another raya, like Rabbi Yochanan, that you are mechayiv yourself, and Mishnah says the chayers. Mishnah says, Kasav kain, you write to a kain, Shani chayv l'cha chamesh lam, I owe you 5 slam. Now the reason why that might be a familiar number is because 5 slam is what's given to the kain gadol for the pidyon haben. So if, let's say you wrote to Kohen, I owe you 5 slam. Says the Mishnah, he has to give him 5 Islam. As Tais explains, the Gemara assumes right now that this chayiv is because he already was obligated and he was indebted through the documentation, so therefore the halach is he has to give him the 5 Islam. But his son is not redeemed. So you see that if you wrote that this is something that could obligate you to go ahead and owe 5 Islam just by writing. So that seems to be like a biyachana that just writing and giving over a document will be machayv yourself. There is different than meshubad limit. There, in other words, the reason why you could make yourself chayiv through the shtar is because there really is some shibud you already have for your bin ben that you really owe him for redeeming your firstborn son. But when there is no lien, there's no shibud at all, you cannot be meshav yourself just with a document, and therefore it does not refute that of Rish Lakish. Just writing in general would not be mechayiv you. There it's different because you really owe the kohen 5 slime for your firstborn son. So Gemara says, wait a second. If that's the case, and you tell me that there's a chiyuv d'oraisa because of the pinya ben, so my kosev, why is he writing that he owes this to the kohen? Of course, it's a pinya ben. Says Gemara, no, k'dilavar le kohen. It's just to select which kohen. There's not giving it to any other kohen. It doesn't have to give this kohen. You give it to the kohen down the block. I'm writing it to you. I owe it to you to tell you I'm going to give you the pinya ben. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, then the reason because there's a shiba d'oraisa of pinya ben, and therefore it's like witnesses are testifying and signing it. So then b'noyim amai in the puppet. So why isn't his firstborn son redeemed? He's saying I'm just selecting you as the kohen, and I owe you the 5 slum, and so why would his son not be redeemed? Says the Gemara because kid'ul like ula. You're right. Rabbinically, it's a concern. Biblically, it should work because the Amma Uli says according to biblical law, pada l'kashit. You're right. After you wrote this document that you're going to give him a 5 slum and you give it to him, of course that should be a redemption of the firstborn son. Or my time, why did they say that the son is not redeemed? You got to give him another 5 slum. Is a gezerah. It's a rabbinic concern with this document that you wrote that you're going to give him 5 slum. Shem Yemer, people might say that you can redeem the firstborn son b'shtaris with shtari chayim that you have on someone else, meaning you have a debt that's owed to you, and you give that deed to the kohen to redeem your firstborn son. People are going to say, what's the difference? The shtar that he has on himself, that he says, here, I owe you 5 slum, or a shtar that he has from someone else. Now, the Mishnah teaches the Chayr said you cannot redeem, not with slaves, not with shtars, and not with karka, which you can't not use shtars, which the Gemara learns of Sukma within Perek Yesh B'chol Nachla. So as to prevent confusion, they said you're never allowed to use a shtar, and if you did use a shtar, it's not going to be redemption. Which even though there's no wrong with the shtar, just selecting which one, no, because we don't want people to confuse other stars. That's why the son is not redeemed. So, but again, it's not a raya to Rabbi Yechanan versus that of Rish Lakish. Now, Amar Rabba says, regarding this machlekes Rabbi Yechanan and Rish Lakish, it seems to be ketanoi. Machlekes tanoi in Baba Basra. What does the Mishnah say? Ariv hayetza achachitzim shtar. So Arb is a guarantor. Someone wants a loan and the lender says, I don't know if he's going to pay. The guarantor says, if he doesn't, I'll pay back. Now, what happens if he, beneath the signature of the witnesses, is where the guarantor signs his name? And he admits that, I took responsibility, I'll be a guarantor, but he only signed after because the witnesses are what finalizes the documentation. He signed, obviously, after the witness had signed. So says the Mishnah Goiva, so the lender can collect only from available properties from the guarantor, not from his nechas meshubam that he sold off, because since he only took responsibility after the document was already sealed, so that's like an oral loan. His guarantee is only oral, it's not really considered as if it's documented. And so to Maisabal of B'Shmol Amar, so you collect only from available properties. Only Benan says no. In the Rebbe, you cannot collect from the Arb, not from his available properties, not from his sold properties. So Amalai said to him, Lama, why? He admits to take responsibility. Why wouldn't he at least be able to collect from the Zechaz and Echayim? So Amalai says, Benan said to him, no, I'll explain to you. Let's say you're walking the street and you see someone choking his friend. And his friend sees that this guy's being choked. Amalai says, leave him. I'll pay you up what he owes you. Of course, Potter, he's going to be exempt. He didn't. It's not because of the faithfulness of the guarantor that he lent it to him. He's choking him for the money. He says, I'll pay it. But of course, that's not why he loaned it to him. Doesn't really have responsibility. Here also, if he went and he signed beneath where the witnesses already signed, he never really took responsibility. It's not why he's lending it to him. And if he's not chayiv, even from his nachas and chayiv. So that's the Mishnah. That's the Mishnah. Now, says the Gemara, Lema, let's say the machlekes we had is the machlekes this time. Rabbi Yechanan, the Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yechanan says that if you write and you just give over what you wrote to the person, that's going to obligate you. That's like Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says just writing without having any one sign on it because you wrote after the witnesses had already signed is effective to obligate you. Whereas Rosh Hashanah is not like Benan. Rosh Hashanah like Benan says, no, it's not effective. So assuming this Machlekes Tanoim, says Gemara, no. Leave the bananas, kulam leplegi. In other words, yes, you're right when you said Rabbi Yochanan is like Bishmal, not like bananas, because Rabbi Yochanan agrees that according to bananas, for sure you're going to be potter, because if even regarding a guarantor, which is a biblical shibud, as the pasuk says in Bereshit Gimel Arveno, I will be the guarantor, says Yehuda. So when there's no witnesses, he says you're going to be potter. For sure, in the case of just admitting that you wrote something, it's for sure going to make you potter, because that's not even a biblical halacha. Oriv is a biblical halacha. We see it's a biblical narrative in the Torah of Oriv. And still, Banana says you can be potter if you sign as a guarantor after the witnesses already signed and you're just writing it and giving it over. But if it continues in days, it doesn't have to be everyone's not is like along party lines. Keep legally Shmuel. You could say this that you wanted to say your shlok is like Banana's not Shmuel. It's not true. You could say yes, Rabbi Yochanan gives Shmuel obviously because they are the ones who hold that you're going to be chayiv just by writing. But Rish Lakish, he could tell you, I could even be like Rishmal, and I disagree with Rabbi Yochanan. Because I'd come to Rishmal Hazel, what do you find Rishmal over there by the case of the guarantor that you're writing without witnesses because you wrote after the witnesses are going to be effective to at least mechayiv yourself in the chazon mechayiv. That's el deshat leila shibud because that has to do with a biblical shibud. Ariv is a biblical halacha. So just by writing, giving over could be mechayiv yourself. But over here, when you just write, oh, I am chayiv, and you give it over, but the rice has no application to a biblical shibud, and you could say that you're not going to be chayiv by just giving it over. Could be your shlokish, would even be like Rabbi Shmuel. Now, Gufa, we had mentioned in passing the halacha of Amar of Gilam and Rav. We had mentioned regarding Shtar Pesikta because we had attempted to bring a raya from our Mishnah like Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Shlokish, because we says no, it's not what you think it is. It's too much Shtar Pesikta, and that's the chiddush of our Mishnah that you can be mechayiv yourself even without any kinyan, which is the halacha we're going back to. How much are you giving to your son? How much are you giving this much? On the vacation they make the kedushin, they've acquired the monies of the nedunya that they're obligated to each other. Because these are things which the kinyan happen just with speaking. Now, Amar Rabba says, Mistabra, it's logical. This teaching of Gidl Amar Rav is Mabita Nara. It's only if the man is marrying off his daughter who's a Nara, who's not yet a full adult. The Kamati Anoliyah, where the father is getting some pleasure because the Kesef Kedushin goes to the father, and that's why he's obligating himself just with his words. But if she's ready, let's say over 12 and a half, he doesn't get the money of the Kedushin, it goes to his daughter, then lie. Then he wouldn't be obligating himself just with words because he's not getting any pleasure out of it. But by God, he swears, Amar Rav, I feel against. Rav is saying he's teaching even with an older daughter. Because the Ilkamach, we don't say this. What do you do with Avi Haben, the father of the Chassan? He doesn't get any Kesef Kedushin. If anything that he's giving, the boy gives the Kedushin. So obviously, the pleasure of that marrying off our kids, that they go on both sides, no matter if the daughter is young or older, they're making a kinyan even without an actual kinyan. Now, the Gemara has a related question. These words, that of the study Pesikta, that they make up by the Tanaim, Nitnu Likasev, is it given over by the Chacham that you can write it down? In other words, let's say they want to have witnesses to sign by these things which work without a kinyan. Maybe you cannot write it down. Why not? So that you should not be able to collect the Mishabadim. Because since there's no kinyan, so there's no lien on the assets, so are you allowed to write it down? Because once you write it down, they're going to collect the Mishabadim. Are you allowed to write it down or not? Somebody says, no, so Rav Ashi says that no, these words are not allowed to be written down because it's merely recording a verbal agreement with which one cannot collect from sold properties. We're saying that it might be used to wrongfully collect from sold properties, therefore you're not allowed to write it down. However, the Gemara says this, the Gemara asks in the halacha of our Mishnah. The Mishnah ended off by saying, the smart men, they would write, which we explained in our Mishnah, that it's going for the halacha of Gidul, that we're too much Torah Pesikta, that this is what they make up by the Tanaim. So the smart ones would write, on the condition, I'll feed your daughter 5 years, because Mashat eat me as long as you're with me. What do you see? That they would write it. I think you're not allowed to write it. This is by the Tanaim. The Shtar Pesikta, they're making up the Tanaim.
Why can't you make a contract?
What?
Why can't you make a contract?
Because these are things that are niknin ba'amida. These are things that are just a recording of a verbal agreement. They're not something that you collect from the Chasim Shabbat. There's no kinyan actually happening over here. Oh, so you're really giving the Gemara's answer later on. There's no kinyan.
The Lekach loses out.
Yeah, but there's no real kinyan over
The
here.
question
So
is
there's-
when it's chal the shibit from the amira or like
Yeah,
in between.
yeah, it's just a mirror that we were saying. I'll give this, but that's like an oral commitment. It's not a real
The question
kinyan.
is when the shibit starts. It's from the amira or from when you make the contract. You can make
No,
the contract or anything.
So we'll see. There's no real contract. They're not really making a contract. That might be Gemara's approach, but we're not really. We're saying a verbal agreement. So the Gemara says no. My question, when we send the Mishnah writing, it means item that they say, but no one's really writing anything. So the Gemara, we're calling speaking as writing. That's how you want to answer. Habikana Yikaisim really means they would say. So he went, and yes, I'll bring a raya. But now we learn the Mishnah about Pikim and out. Mishnah said, if someone writes to his wife, that, I have nothing to do with your assets, and the Mishnah talks about over there that he's not going to eat the payers, but he will be. But turn learned in the Brisa, it means if someone says to his wife, you see, Kaisiv could really mean saying, Mishnah says, in a person cannot write documents of engagement and the marriage, which is generally the Kesubah, only with the consent of both of them. But with the consent of both of them. Kais, when you write, my love, when you said Shtori Erison, so Nisun means the Ksuba. What Shtori Erison? That's Shtar Psikta. The Ksuba is what? A one-time amount of their obligation, that's by the marriage. And what's by the Shtar by the Erison? That's how much the Tanaim is, what we agree to how much each one's going to give to their children, to the Chasna. So the Mallah, no, Shtori Erison Mamash means literally the document that the husband goes and does the Kedusha with. Harid Mekadeshesli, that he writes in the document, gives it to her. That we have to tell you that you have to write it with her consent. So it's not the Shtari Psikta, it's the Shtari Edison itself. Papa, Rav Shavia, that they say that if you write it without her consent, it's not going to be Kedushin. Like we learned, let's say you wrote it Lishma for her sake, but without her awareness, without her consciousness. So Rabbi Nami, they say, that's going to work, that's okay. We don't need her consent to write it. Rabbi they say, no, English not going to be even engaged. So that's what we're saying. So it's the actual Shtari Edison itself. It's no right to the Shtari Psik. We're not talking about the monetary obligations. The Gemara says, Tashmat being right from our Mishnah. Mishnah said, Nesur, they die, these men, these stepfathers. We said, but they send their daughters and they send them the husband, they get fed from the available assets. And this stepdaughter, she gets fed from the husband Shabbatim, and she can also because she's like a creditor. As Rashi explains, if she's not holding a document of the Psikta, how could she get from the Shabbatim? Obviously, that you do right by the Tanaim. Says the Gemara, over here, and this is really what you were saying before, is B'shakam Miyada. You're right, they did an actual kinyan. So you did actual kinyan, so you have an actual kinyan, and you can write it, and you can write the Chazm Shabbatim. You hear? That's different than the regular Tanaim. So you must say, that's the case, Abanas Nami. So why are you saying, well, by the stepdaughter, that all the daughters should have that from the Tanaim? Says the Gemara, no, she only made a kinyan for her stepdaughter from her previous marriage, and not for her future marriage, her daughter that she's going to have together with it. So the Gemara, my paska. So wait a second, is that like a definitive thing for the Chachamim that a woman would make a kinyan for her stepdaughter and not for her regular daughters? That you say in the Mishnah, the daughters will get fed in the Chazm Chayrin, and her daughter from her previous marriage will get in the Chazm Shabbatim? Says the yes, because the stepdaughter, the Hab B'Shas Kinyan, she was there at the time of the Kinyan because she was already born from the previous marriage. So the Kinyan is effective. Bonus Lab B'Shas Kinyan, the daughters that were not there at the time of the Kinyan, the Kinyan is not effective. So the Gemara wonders and says, wait a second, you think it's not possible that the daughters could be there at the time of the Kinyan? Milas, mean that they had together? Milas, we're talking about that B'Shas Kinyan, can we not? We could also be speaking about that the daughters were there at the time of the Kinyan. How's that possible? We're going to give Shubahadra. Let's say a couple was married and they had their own children and he divorced her and then he remarried her and then he's writing a Tanayim and that includes their own children. And even so, you're telling me anonymously in the Mishnah that the daughters get fed from the Menechar and Shabbatim, but they could also be there at the time of the Kinyan, not only a stepdaughter. So Ella rather says a different approach. The lesser the stepdaughter that is not included in the stipulation of the courts of the Ksuba. Because what does it say in the Ksuba? The female daughters that you can have from me. So the stepdaughter doesn't have it because it's not from him, it's from a previous marriage. So then the kin is affected. Bonus, there isn't but his own daughters that are included in Tanai Bezin, and therefore the kin is not affected. So one wonders, what is it, big agree? What, they any worse off because they're also getting Tanai Bezin, they shouldn't be able to get also the kinyan? So the Gemara says, the Gemara ends up with the following approach. But nice time, and I'll tell you the reason why for the daughters. That's keeping the Isnu B'Tanai Bezin since they are included in the stipulation of the court. We're concerned that maybe before he died, he gave them over bundles of money for their mezainis, because it's not business machliyuv. Whereas by the bas ishte, which is a creditor, maybe he didn't do that, and therefore for her we're not concerned, and therefore for her we say that she could collect, versus that of the daughters cannot collect from the chasim shabbat. Now, it's in the Mishnah, Lo Yom HaRishon, the first stepfather should not say, oh, when she's by me, I'll feed her. No, he has to rather bring her money to where she is by the second stepfather. So Rabbi Chizki says, this tells us, in other words, that from the fact that we're saying that he gives it to the place of where the mother is, and we don't say that to where the brothers are, we learn that that's the halacha, that the bas should be Esel Ima. The daughter should be by the mother, and the daughter gets fed from the sons, but they feed her by the mother's house, and we don't force her to live with them. So that's what you see, because we're saying that he sends it to Lamakam She'ima where the mother is. So the Gemara says, remind me that we're talking about Gedayla, maybe we're talking about a minor, and that's why we don't say that the daughter is by the brothers. Why? What do you mean? There was actually such a story. If someone died and he left over a young son for his mother, so the inheritors of the father says, okay, let him live with us. The mother said, no, I want my son to be with me. So we leave him by the mother. We don't leave him next to the other brothers who are fit to inherit him, because actually Ma'aseh was such a story. The Shachtu and the Gears is many different gears. Either it's Erev Rosh Hashanah, or it's Erev Harishon the first evening, or it's Erev HaPesach. But either way, we see that they killed him because they want to inherit him. So there's such a concern also over here. They might kill her because to inherit her the 10th of the nechasim that she's allowed to get. But by Gedayla, we're not concerned that they're just going to kill her. She's old enough to protect herself. I can tell you that maybe she should live with the brothers. So what's the raya? Maybe it's only by Ketana we're concerned that they're going to kill her. So says the Gemara, if that's the case, there would be a difference between the Gedayla and the Ketana. Listen to Lamakam Shehi. It should say you should bring it to wherever she is. That would sound like the older where she is, and the Ketana wherever she is. As you continue to what's this that you're saying in a definitive way where the mother is? We can learn from that every bas etzel aim, any daughter goes to the mother. If she's older or younger, that's appropriate to go. So it's not only like we're trying to ask from the Ketana, because maybe they're going to kill her or this and that. No, we see that because then you should have said just Lamakam Shima. Why say Lamakam Shima? Obviously, all types of daughters saying it to any time.